Hey, how you doing, students? This is Mr. Clifford. Welcome to Krugman's Economics for AP. Now, we're still in microeconomics, and now we're talking about section 10 that's going to talk about behind the supply curve. The section starts off with things you should know for this class, but also for real life. In fact, it starts off with the idea of profit. If you ever had a lemonade stand when you were a kid, you know the idea of profit. It's the total revenue minus your total cost. But it turns out there's two different types of costs: explicit costs and implicit costs. Explicit costs, the normal out-of-pocket costs you think of when you run a business. So for a lemonade stand, it's like the cups and the pitchers and the table. Implicit costs are the opportunity costs, the things you give up when you run your lemonade stand. So economists like to say total revenue minus explicit and implicit costs is your economic profit. Now, students get confused about this. A lot of times they think if I'm making no profit, that's a bad thing, and it's not. If you're covering your explicit costs and your opportunity costs, you're making no economic profit, means you're breaking even. And you'll learn more about that in Module 53 when you find out about profit maximization. That's where you're going to learn the most important rule in microeconomics, MR equals MC. It's the profit maximizing rule. Whoa, caution, slow down here. When I say most important rule, I mean this is the most important rule in all of microeconomics. You're going to be using it over and over and over again. Now, you've already learned about the concept of what's called marginal analysis, looking at the additional benefit and the additional cost of making a decision. Now, firms do this. They look at the marginal revenue they earn from selling a product versus the marginal cost of producing that product. The profit maximizing rule is to produce where MR hits MC. It'll make more sense on the graph. Notice right here, the marginal revenue, or the price, is $18. So that means this firm can sell every single unit at $18. It also gives you the marginal cost, which goes down and up. The question is, how many units should this firm produce? Well, the answer is where the MR hits the MC. That will maximize profit. The reason why is if the marginal revenue is greater than the marginal cost for producing that unit, you'll get profit. As long as the MR is greater than the MC, you should produce that unit. And you should stop when the marginal revenue hits the marginal cost. If the marginal cost is higher than the marginal revenue, you're actually going to lose profit on that unit. Now, after you learn about profit in Module 53, you're going to go to Module 54 and learn about production. The most important concept that you're going to learn in this module is the law of diminishing marginal returns. Now, to understand that law, you have to understand that firms have fixed inputs and variable inputs. Fixed input is a resource that you have that doesn't change with the amount that you produce. So like for a pizza company, the oven is a fixed resource or a fixed input. So it doesn't matter how many pizzas you produce, you still have to pay for that one oven. A variable input does change with the amount you produce. So for a pizza company, that'd be like the workers or the pizza dough. If you want to produce more pizza, you need more of those things. Now let's go back to that law. If you keep adding variable resources to fixed resources, eventually you're going to get less and less additional output. This is super important for a company to understand because you can't keep getting more and more output if you just hire more workers. Each worker eventually will get you less and less additional pizza. The graph that goes along with this, and it's called the total product curve. Notice it increases, but it doesn't increase at a constant rate. It increases at a decreasing rate. That's because the marginal product is falling because of the law of diminishing marginal returns. Now, if you're confused, don't be. If you read the module, it'll make a lot of sense. And then finally, you get to Module 55, which guess what? Is the hardest part of microeconomics. Sorry. Well, it might not be the hardest part for you, but for a lot of students, learning the cost curves is actually the hardest part of microeconomics because there's a lot of things coming at you. There's marginal costs, there's average total cost, there's average variable cost, there's average fixed cost. There's a lot of stuff you're going to learn in this module. And the good news is there's some module videos that explain all these concepts. For now, the most important thing to understand is the idea that there's fixed costs and there's variable costs. Fixed costs are the cost of fixed inputs, and variable costs are costs of variable inputs. And the sum of fixed costs and variable costs are total costs. And you're also going to learn about the average cost curves. There's average total cost, average variable cost, and average fixed cost. Now you're going to learn how to calculate these, and you also have to be able to put them on a graph like this. Again, this is why students get so confused in microeconomics, but don't get confused. We've got the average variable cost, the average fixed cost, the marginal cost, and the average total cost. And there's a relationship between these things that you'll learn about in the module videos. Now, one of the key concepts that you definitely need to know is the relationship between marginal and average. So take a look right here. Notice that the marginal cost curve hits the average total cost curve at average total cost minimum point. This is because marginal cost is the additional cost. So if the additional cost of producing something is below the average, it's going to pull the average down. When the marginal cost is above the average, it's going to pull the average up. That's why average total cost, or ATC, goes down, hits a minimum, then goes right back up. Now you're going to be using these cost curves in the next two sections, and a lot of different graphs you're going to be learning. So make sure to read this section carefully. Now the difference between Module 55 and Module 56 is that Module 56 is going to talk about the long run. The idea of the long run is that all resources or inputs are variable and none of them are fixed. Now, this is used by businesses for planning purposes because they're always in the short run, but they can plan for the long run. The most important concept you're going to learn is something called economies of scale. Now, a good example of this concept is the idea of producing cars. If you produce one car in your garage, the average cost of that car is going to be huge because you only produce one. But if you use a factory, then you produce thousands of cars, the average cost for each car will fall. That's called economies of scale. Of course, you're also going to get a graph that shows that concept. It's going to show you economies of scale and something else called diseconomies of scale. The last module in this section is module 57, and it's going to cover the 4 market structures. Don't skip this module because it's going to set you up for everything you'll learn in the next 2 sections. You're going to talk about perfect competition, monopolist competition, oligopolies, and monopolies. There's module videos that explain all these in details, but for now, it's important to understand the idea that it all comes down to the number of firms in the market and the control that the firms have over the price. So in perfect competition, there's thousands of really small firms and they have zero control of the price. They're forced to take the price set by the market. A monopoly, on the other side, has complete control over price and there's only one firm. Whoa, caution, now slow down here. I just said a monopoly has complete control over the price. Well, that's not exactly right. Students get confused about what a monopoly is, right? It's just not a board game. It's something else, right? A monopoly has control over the price up to consumers' willingness to pay, right? The electric company can't charge you $1 billion for something because no one's going to pay $1 billion. And obviously, oligopolies and monopolist competition are somewhere in the middle. An oligopoly is a market with few firms and has a lot of control over the price, whereas monopolist competition has many firms and they have some control over the price. Again, this module is going to set you up for everything you're going to learn in future sections, so make sure to pay attention, okay? Till next time.